Hi, my name is Savannah Simmons, and this is my presentation of debunking myths. I am focusing on learning styles, and so what are the learning styles? There are 7 learning styles. The first is visual or spatial, so just using pictures or images in your learning. Next is auditory or musical, or oral it's also called, which is using sounds and music and turning the information into a musical way. Linguistic or verbal, so using your speech in reading or writing, and speech obviously. Then there's kinesthetic or physical, which is using your bodies or your hands to learn, so learning by doing it. Logical or mathematical, so just using logic, reasoning in your learning, so these kids are obviously good at math. Interpersonal or social, so just learning best by being in a group or doing work with other people, be able to bounce ideas off of them and working well together. Or there's also intrapersonal or solitary, which is working alone. You do best by just being in your own little bubble and doing it on your own. Most of them have a name or 2 or 3 even on what they are, but they all, no matter the name, mean the same thing. So those are the 7. There are 3 main ones that people mostly go off of, which is the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So learning by seeing, by listening, or by doing. So people claim that there are many teachers, schools, or school districts that believe that students have a specific type of learning, that when they're taught this way, or when they study in this way, that is the best way for them to learn. So if they're a kinesthetic learner, they do best by doing. So doing like a science experiment, they're going to remember that information better later on because they did it. Or if they're musical, turning the information into a song, they're going to remember better because it was musical and that's our ideal way of learning. But there was an article published called "You May Think You Learn Better in a Certain Way, You Actually Don't." And it mentioned that learning styles first became popular in the 1950s, so about almost 70 years ago. But it faded away because scientists couldn't duplicate the theory. They couldn't take the theory and actually duplicate it in practice. It came back in the 1970s because they thought maybe it was a way to think about learning disabilities with the learning styles, but then again it faded again and has come back quite strongly. Also mentioned in this article was that Phil Newton, who was an associate professor at the College of Medicine at Swansea University, looked into how prevalent these learning styles were by looking into popular online academic databases. It came back that 89% of research papers indirectly or directly supported the concept of learning styles. This is such a popular idea and concept that I even learned about it many times throughout my undergrad, in my Bachelor's of Education. I learned how to implement them all in my lesson plans, and we were taught that we had to hit them each learning style, so every 7, twice in a unit. So you had to figure out a way to hit every student in your classroom, which is obviously your goal as a teacher. This was expected through practicums as well, so when our supervisor would come into our placement, they would look through our binder and see how we're hitting each learning style. So in an article boldly titled "Another Nail in the Coffin for Learning Styles," said that students do not benefit from studying according to their supposed learning style. It's by Christian Jarrett. He said that the idea that we learn better when taught via our preferred modality or learning style, such as visually, orally, or by doing, kinesthetic, is not supported by evidence. Nonetheless, the concept remains hugely popular, no doubt in part because learning via our preferred style can lead us to feel like we've learned more even though we haven't. Not only is there no evidence to back up learning styles, Cindy May, in her article titled "The Problem with Learning Styles," mentions that there are several studies contradicting the effectiveness of them. So, are learning styles a myth? Yes. Not only has it never been scientifically proven to be true, it's been proven to be false on many occasions. We all have ways that we feel we learn and study best, That does not mean we have one main learning style that is our ideal type. If you're a musical person, yeah, you might remember songs better, or by doing things, like it does help to remember things, but I don't think anyone can say that you have one ideal learning style. I think you can benefit from them all, and you have to kind of play around with what you think works best for you. So in an article titled Improving Students' Learning with Effective Learning Techniques, Promising Directions from Cognitive and Educational Psychology, they talk about many learning techniques that teachers should use to better regulate students' learning. They mention that psychologists have been developing and evaluating the efficacy of techniques for study and instruction for more than 100 years. Nevertheless, some effective techniques are underutilized. Many teachers do not learn about them, and hence many students do not use them, despite evidence suggesting that the techniques could benefit student achievement with little added effort. So they had 10 main ideas in their study, in their paper, and the first one was elaborative interrogation, so figuring out why a fact or concept is true. Second was self-explanation, so explaining how the new information is related to known information, or like creating a connection in their learning. Summarization, so just writing summaries of the information in different lengths. That's important. Obviously, you don't need to summarize something that you don't need to know. Highlighting and underlining, so marking and highlighting information that's potentially important before you know about it being important. And I think it's also important to teach students, like, you don't just highlight the whole paragraph. You know, you have to pick out the parts that you think are really key. Otherwise, it just becomes overwhelming for them. Keywords, just using them and associating a mental image. Imagery for text, so when you're reading text or information, just finding something in your mind to click it together with an image. Rereading, so just rereading the material again. I know a girl in the class talked about she does it for 3 different times, and each time prompts them to look for something different, and I think just gives you a deeper understanding of the material. Practice testing, so taking pre-tests, testing yourself on the information or on the material before your actual test really helps them gain a better understanding, or what to look for and what to remember. Distributed practice, so implementing a schedule of practice that spreads out study activities over time. And then interleaved practice is the 10th, so implementing a schedule of practice that mixes different kinds of problems or schedule of study that mixes different kinds of materials with a single study session. So just like Carey did in his text with different types of paintings, that's what that was for him, was interleaved. So in How We Learn by Benedict Carey, he provides us with a ton of strategies to help people learn more effectively, all of which he backs up with studies to show their validity and effectiveness, including some of the mentioned in the article, which were like practice testing, distributed, and interleaved practice. Those ones in his novel as well, he backed up with studies that show that they were very effective. In the article, Neuroscience for Educators, What Are They Seeking and What Are They Finding? The authors Casey Hook and Martha Farah conducted research into why these teachers are taking the neuroscience-based PD sessions. So 4 participants said that their motivation for attending was to help close a gap between education and neuroscience, to understand better the state of neuroscience in their classroom and in education, and how to better integrate neuroscience in their class. 5 were just looking to gain knowledge that they could apply into their classrooms, so it's just something that teachers weren't feeling confident in. Like, they knew that knowing how students learn would benefit them in their classroom, but they didn't know what that meant exactly. And then when they were asked about the impact of their classroom practice, like that this conference would make, most teachers said yes, that it would impact their class, but they couldn't give a concrete example of how. You know, they mentioned, taking brain breaks and that kind of thing, but they couldn't really give concrete examples. So it's so important that teachers use information that has been backed up by science and studies when they're using methods to improve how a student learns in their classroom. Unfortunately, that doesn't include learning styles. They have been proven to not be effective in students' learning. I wish I could take a test and see what style works best for us and it would help us learn and to study better, but unfortunately that's not the case. using methods that have been proven, like pre-testing, interleaving, distributed practice, underlining, highlighting, rereading, synthesizing, those kind of techniques need to be taught more in the classroom, because those are techniques that will help them throughout their whole career and throughout their whole life. Those are lifelong skills that we're teaching them. We can't just teach them that, oh, if you put this in a song, you'll remember it for life. And that's true for some students, but just by teaching to their learning style, you're doing them a disservice as well by not teaching them how to do those important skills that you need for life. So that is myth busted for learning styles, and thank you very much.